Good evening, my viewers. Welcome to another edition of Essential Inspirational Highlights. My listeners, have you ever been in a difficult situation or encountered a complicated problem that left you feeling frustrated, puzzled, dumbfounded, or doomed to failure? Attempting to find an efficient way for a resolution was getting you nowhere. Your communication fell on deaf ears. You tried everything humanly possible to resolve the issue with no success. With no positive outlook, you see no way out. Your back is against the wall and you are at your wit's end. So, my listeners, how do you handle this dilemma? The answer to the question will be addressed in this lesson. The lesson text we found in Exodus, the 14th chapter, verses 1, 2, 13, and 14. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they turn and encamp before Bahahiroth, between Migdol and the sea over against Bosphon, before it shall ye encamp by the sea. In verses 13 and 14, and Moses said unto the people, Fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. In the lesson text for this evening, stand still. The book of Exodus. In the book of Exodus, the Israelites, known as the children of Israel, were slaves in Egypt for 430 years. The cruel taskmasters made life unbearable for the children of Israel. There was no escape. There was no way of escape. It looked like an impossible situation for the Israelites, and they probably felt that they will remain living in this inhumane situation forever as slaves. Their cries, however, were not ignored. In a mighty way, God intervened on their behalf. God chose Moses to lead the Israelites out of the land of Egypt to the promised land. In Exodus chapters 5 through 10, Moses pleaded with Pharaoh several times to release the children of Israel so they could serve God. Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he was as stubborn as a mule. Pharaoh would not budge. God had to send 10 plagues to demonstrate his power over the gods of Egypt. The Israelites never felt the brunt of the plagues. It was the Egyptians that had to suffer. On the 10th plague, God sent the death angel to kill the firstborn child of every family and the firstborn of every animal. No Egyptian family was spared. Even Pharaoh's firstborn child was killed. After the 10th plague, Pharaoh had enough, since he was directly affected with the death of his firstborn son. Pharaoh finally released the children of Israel to leave Egypt. God guided the Israelites by a pillar of cloud during the day and by a pillar of fire at night. The cloud and the fire were always in full view. In Exodus, the 14th chapter, verses 1 and 2, God gave Moses specific instructions concerning the path he wanted the children of Israel to follow. The path ahead was leading the Israelites to the Red Sea. This was not a mistake or a fluke. Remember, God is omniscient. He is wise, and he never makes a mistake. As the children of Israel were walking, they noticed Pharaoh and his army from a distance with horses and chariots approaching them. Well, as you can imagine, the Israelites were both scared and outraged. They started crying out to God for being trapped in this situation. The children of Israel told Moses that they were better off being slaves in Egypt rather than dying in the wilderness. My listeners, I know tempers were flying and a lot of finger pointing was targeted at Moses. The children of Israel felt their situation was hopeless. They could only see and feel that death was forthcoming. Pharaoh and the Egyptian army were behind them, and the sea was in front of them. They could not attempt walking toward the left or the right because they were surrounded by mountains. There were about 600,000 men. If you include the women and children, it was estimated that 2 million people fled Egypt along with their cattle. Even though the Israelites had more people than the Egyptian army, it did not matter. The children of Israel had no weapon to defend themselves. From a human perspective, they could not compete with Pharaoh and his army riding in the chariots, pulled by horses coming toward them. The Israelites were stuck in a dangerous predicament. There was no way out. Moses told the children of Israel not to be afraid, not to be fearful, and to stand still. Stand still, my listeners, means halt, come to a stop, hold back, and remain in place. Moses went on to tell the Israelites that God Almighty will fight their battle and rescue them from the enemy. God miraculously delivered the children of Israel by parting the Red Sea. Exodus, the 14th chapter and the 22nd verse states, and the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. What a mighty God we serve. God fixed it where the Israelites will walk on a dry pathway without getting their feet or clothes wet. What happened to the Egyptian army? When the Egyptian army tried to pursue the Israelites in the midst of the Red Sea, Exodus, the 14th chapter, verses 24 and 25 stated, and it came to pass that in the morning watch, the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the clouds, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighting for them against the Egyptians. The waters covered the Egyptians, chariots, and horses. They drowned, and not one of them survived. My listeners, that's the kind of God we serve. God intentionally planned for Israel to walk through the Red Sea. This was a setup for the Israelites and the Egyptians to witness the power of God Almighty. God knew what the final outcome would be: victory. So, what lesson can we learn? My listeners, we can learn from this lesson that we will experience some Red Sea moments in our life. The difficult situations and perplexing problems that we encounter may look impossible to resolve in our eyes, but with God, anything is possible. When you feel that there's no way out, no solution in sight, all options have been entirely exhausted, and you have no clue how you're going to get through your predicament, take Moses' advice. Don't panic. Don't have a defeat mentality. Don't submit under pressure. Stand still and see the glory of the Lord. This is not your battle. It's God's battle. God will intervene on your behalf to settle the matter. Only God can guide you and lead you. Pray and trust God. Have faith in God, knowing that He is working out your dilemma for your best interest and not the other person's interest. God will work out your situation in such a way that you know it is God. God specializes in miracles. He will bring you out victoriously, and God will get the glory. My listeners, remember to turn your situation over to God, and He will work it out. Stand still. Thank you, my viewers, for tuning in this evening to Essential Inspirational Highlights. I am your host, Sister Janie. I will be back in 2 weeks on Friday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Have a good evening.